Whoa, whoa, whoa. Where did that ending come from? It's easy to miss if you're not reading quite closely enough. Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for another short story discussion, a short story discussion that will be in two separate playlists here on the channel. Number one being the short story discussion playlist, but number two, a short story by short story read along of Ernest Hemingway, the Finca Vigia edition. Today's short story is known as My Old Man, and there are three sections of this video. Number one, a So What Happened recap of the short story itself. Number two, a literary criticism. And number three, a writer's corner portion of this video. So let's get into it. My Old Man by Ernest Hemingway. So, what happened? Joe loves his dad, and he tells us about how he used to go running with his dad, who had to keep the weight off, what with being a jockey and all. Then Joe tells us some stories, and they pretty much all include a racial slur against Italians. Strange that in one of these stories, there is an Italian angry at his father, and the next thing Joe knows, he's living in a new city. Then Joe and his dad go to the races, and his dad bets on a horse named Curcuban. But Joe notices another horse, a horse unlike anything Joe has ever seen. Great, big, strong, and pure. This horse's name is Czar or Khazar. I have never seen Czar spelled with a K, but the C sound, the K sound, it could overlap, so we will use them interchangeably for the sake of this video. And a lot of the other bettors notice Czar too. But in the end, it's Curcuban that wins. And when Joe comments on this, his father answers with the following quote. I've gone too far. Not that quote. That was me. There were guys. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. Sorry. George Gardner's a swell jockey, all right, he said. It sure took a great jockey to keep that Czar horse from winning. Meaning that George Gardner, who was riding the Czar horse, purposely and purposefully lost to Curcuban. And this little ditty kind of ruins horse racing for Joe. It kind of ruins horse racing for Joe's dad, too, because he stops jockeying and he starts drinking more and betting more until he hits it big and goes in on buying a horse and starts jockeying that horse. And he's doing all right for himself. But one day there's an accident and a pileup on the track, and Joe loses sight of his dad. Things clear up a bit, and Joe finds his dad again, face down and pale. Joe's father is dead. George, an old friend, comes to collect Joe, and while they're together, Joe hears the shot that puts down his father's horse. And then we get this exchange. George and I went out the gate, and I was trying to stop bawling, and George wiped off my face with his handkerchief, and we were standing back a little ways while the crowd was going out of the gate, and a couple of guys stopped near us while we were waiting for the crowd to get through the gate, and one of them was counting a bunch of mutual tickets, and he said, "Well, Butler got his all right." The other guy said, I don't give a good goddamn if he did. The crook, he had it coming to him on the stuff he's pulled." "I'll say," said the other guy, and he tore a bunch of tickets in two. And George Gardner looked at me to see if I'd heard, and I had heard all right, and he said, "Don't you listen to what those bums said, Joe. Your old man was one swell guy. But I don't know. Seems like when they get started, they don't leave a guy nothing." So, yeah, what a turn of events here. So, I want to start with something that is the moral of the story and then flip that on its head. The moral of the story, as far as this is concerned, is this. We have Joe recounting his time spent with his father while his father was not jockeying. They're in a new town and finding things to do. Joe tells us this. There were guys selling matrimonial papers and girls selling rubber eggs that when you squeezed them, a rooster came out of them, and one old wormy-looking guy that went by with postcards of Paris showing them to everybody, and, of course, nobody ever bought any. And when he would come back and show the underside of the pack, and they would be smutty postcards, and lots of people would dig down and buy them. That, in my opinion, is the moral of the story. It doesn't matter what good business someone is trying to do. It doesn't matter if someone has dedicated their life to being a jockey. If there is bad business, if there is naughty business, if there is dirty business to be had, that is what will get the views. That is what will get the money. That is what will draw the crowd. That's why, hey, I'm here on YouTube talking about literature every day for like 550 days straight, but still it's my OnlyFans that's popular. You can't outshine the stuff that nobody is supposed to see. It is the forbidden fruit. There is dirty work to be done in this short story, and so Joe's dad having to provide ends up falling into that. But the story of the moral comes on that very same page from this short story. We have the quote that I talked about earlier. George Gardner. So let me start a little bit earlier here. I felt all trembly and funny inside, and then they were all jammed in with people going downstairs to stand in front of the board where they'd watched what Curcuban paid. Honest, watching the race, I'd forgot how much my old man had bet on Curcuban. I wanted Czar to win so damned bad. But now it was all over. It was swell to know we had the winner. Wasn't it a swell race, Dad? Wasn't it a swell race, Dad? I said to him. He looked at me sort of funny with his derby on the back of his head. George Gardner's a swell jockey, all right, he said. It sure took a great jock to keep that Czar horse from winning. The argument that we have earlier in this short story, what this quote from Joe's father tells me, is that Joe's father was the jockey on a horse that was supposed to lose. Joe won that race. That's why they had to get out of town. That's why they had all these problems with Italian people. That's why you have all of these slurs against Italians in this short story. You have a narrator who is not afraid to purvey those slurs against Italians in his own story. He feels that his father, so in the event, Joe's father was unable, perhaps unwilling, to make a horse lose, and so some powerful people lost money on the horse that was supposed to quote unquote take the dive. That's a boxing term. It comes back in this short story. Because of that, Joe and his father have to go. They have to find some other place. Joe's father stops jockeying. Is this because he was afraid of the consequences? Is this because he was told, you don't jockey anymore? Is this because of some mixture of the two? Well, we have reason to believe that Joe's father is not supposed to jockey anymore under severe consequence, under the threat of severe consequence. Joe's father wins a good deal of money, ends up buying a horse, and he begins to jockey again. Now, horse racing, how do you fix a crash? How do you fix a pileup? I don't know. It's not like you can just cut the brake lines. But at the end of the story, when we get the quote, where is it? Well, Butler got his, all right. He got what was coming to him. And the other guy said, I don't give a good goddamn if he did. The crook had it coming to him on the stuff he's pulled. Maybe I'm missing something in this short story, but that is what I got out of it. Joe's dad wanted to be an honest and honorable man. Joe's dad realized that he can only sell smut, and so he decided to peddle the smut. An interesting short story. And that leads us into the writer's corner portion of things. This is not a saccharine short story. There is the quote that is often attributed to Stephen King, but I don't think it comes from Stephen King. I think he even says in On Writing that it's not his quote, but I might be mistaken. Kill your darlings. Now, for Stephen King, what this often refers to is the fact that Stephen King is a very verbose writer. Sometimes there are scenes, sometimes there are descriptions, sometimes there are characters in our writing that we have to kill. We have to get rid of them, not kill them on the page, but kill them prior to the page, kill them prior to the page that the reader ends up seeing. But I think that there is a higher order purpose of this quote to kill your darlings. I contend that the greatest way to kill your darlings is not to edit out some stuff, but it's to find what is precious to you in your life. What do you hold precious? What do you hold beyond contempt? What do you hold to be, oh, so syrupy sweet? Saccharine. What do you hold in your life to be precious, to be holier than thou? What do you hold in your life to be that thing, oh, you couldn't write about? Maybe it's a father figure. Hemingway held his father, as far as I can tell from what I've read about Hemingway, in pretty high regard. Maybe it's your mother. Everyone, all the sailors have that mom tattoo and the heart on their bicep, right? Mothers, fairly popular characters, fairly popular parents. Maybe it is a sibling, right? One of the best ways to grow as a writer is to take that precious thing, whatever that precious thing is to you. Say you love puppies. You just love puppies. Can do no wrong in your world. You have endless amounts of patience for puppies. You love puppies. You love the sight of puppies, and you do that weird thing that people do where they want to squeeze a puppy until it pops. You feel that way about puppies. One of the best ways to become a better writer, so long as you can find that thing that's sacred to you, is to take that puppy and make it the bad guy in a story. Take that puppy and kill the idea of the puppy. It forces you to grow as a writer. It forces you to see beyond what it is that you in your life hold beyond contempt. It forces you to see beyond what your own values and expectations are. It forces you to see beyond what it is that you assume in the world. You assume that puppy can't be the bad guy, so you make that puppy the bad guy. You assume that everyone feels that same way about the puppy, so the puppy dies in paragraph 1. Where could your short story go post puppy? Well, you then have to figure it out. Well, you are then responsible for what happens in that short story because you don't have the crutch of the holy thing. You don't have the crutch of the super sacred. You don't have the crutch of that idea which you assume with which you assume your reader will agree. You don't have that anymore. You think that everyone loves their mother. So when that short story is being written and you write a ghastly mother, you are forced to reconsider your own conceptions about the mother figure. You think that everybody just holds their dear old paw as super swell. This short story has a dad who is good to his son and is probably not a very good man. Those things can both be true. In that way, this short story is not saccharine. It is not too syrupy sweet. We have almost a cold and dispassionate narrator. Not quite, but close enough. Close enough for our narrator to look at his own father figure and say, man, I get what was going on with Dad now. Kill your darlings, not just the things that you like on the page. The good and the bad. I want to go back to that ending of this short story. George and I went out to the gate, and I was still trying to stop bawling, and George wiped off my face with his handkerchief, and we were standing back a little ways while the crowd was going out of the gate, and a couple of guys stopped near us while we were waiting for the crowd to get through the gate, and one of them was counting a bunch of mutual tickets, and he said, "Well, Butler got his all right." The other guy said, "I don't give a good goddamn if he did. The crook had it coming to him. The stuff he's pulled." "I'll say he had," said the other guy, and he tore a bunch of tickets in two. And George Gardner looked at me to see if I heard what I had looked at me to see if I'd heard, and I had, all right. And he said, "Don't you listen to what those bums said, Joe. Your old man was one hell of a swell guy. But I don't know. It seems like when they get started, they don't leave a guy nothing." If you weren't paying close enough attention to this short story and didn't put a couple things together, and look, I said maybe I put them together poorly. If you didn't put them together, and I don't mean you, I mean the general you, if you didn't put those things together, then that ending comes out of nowhere. And that's a good thing. It's a very good thing that you have held your reader accountable and your reader had to catch little hints along the way. Here's the bad part of that. I think that dialogue was too explicit. I think we could have had more implicit dialogue there. I think that between those two guys, the line, "he had it coming to him" on the stuff he's pulled, the calling him a crook, I don't think you have to put those in there. I think that if you're trusting your reader, which is something that's very hard to do, if you're trusting your reader there, you allow them to infer why the guy would say, "Well, Butler got his, all right." And the other guy would say, "I don't give a good goddamn if he did." You stop there, and then when George looks at Joe to see if he heard, we get all of the other stuff implied. Once George looks at Joe, did he hear that? We know everything. Once George looks at Joe to see if he heard, we understand that there were other forces involved here. That is all I have for this discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. There are multiple videos on the channel every single week. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, I drop poetry every Monday. There is a full-length read-along for Dubliners here on the channel. And as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.